Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to another edition of Movie Goodness, where we examine life through cinema here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and today is John Wick Day. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. This is the John Wick edition of Movie Goodness, and today we're just going to talk about John Wick in honor, in commemoration of the release of John Wick Chapter 4, which drops in theaters today. The time of this release is in theaters right now. So we're going to go over the previous three chapters of John Wick Chapter 2, and John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum, and discuss more about the John Wick universe because this has turned into a phenomenon of a franchise, and it caught me along with everybody else completely off guard. This was not intended to be a franchise, you know what I'm saying? At least from the outside looking in. I don't know if in 2014 or 2014, uh if the plans going forward were to have multiple sequels and spin-offs and a television show come off of this little movie that was released in 2014, and it just turned into something huge, gigantic, and uh, uh, dare I say amazing. This is truly an amazing franchise, not because of its Academy Award caliber acting or the storytelling or the complex plot that is running through this these films. It's just action. If you're an action film junkie like yours truly, this is perfect for you. I grew up watching these straight to video into VHS action films. Those action films that used to come on Thursday nights on HBO. HBO, you can set your watch to it. Every Thursday night they'll have this kind of a low budget B level action movie that comes out that probably starred a B level actor. These weren't, Sylvester Stallone or Arnold Schwarzenegger or Steven Seagal films or Jean Claude Van Damme. It was just a lower tier, just under them, like Jeff Speedman or not Speedman. What was his name? Or was it Speedman? Oh no, Speakman. I believe his name was. But anywho's, that just goes to show you how much B level he was. But he couldn't act. But they do these just amazing action movies. They're martial artists who studios, these little studio production companies, will put in the movie because they can do all the stunts. And those type of movies are just guilty pleasure joys, and like the Cynthia Rocks, stuff like that. I, I enjoyed those type of movies. You remember like American Ninja and oh my god, what's the name of that movie? It's on the tip of my tongue, can't get it out. It'll come to me later on. But anyway, movies like that. I love those type of movies. I used to watch those with my dad. And we were action movie fanatics. Our favorite movie to watch together was Die Hard, of course. Die Hard was like the pinnacle of action movies. It's still the pinnacle. It's so much of a pinnacle that every movie copied Die Hard. Every movie had to have one guy trapped in a building, or one guy trapped on a plane, one guy trapped in a subway, or trapped on, you remember that? Everything copied Die Hard to the point where it just diluted Die Hard. But, and I'm talking about Die Hard sequels, not the original. But action movies just, around that era were just amazing to me, because they were what they were. They weren't trying to be nothing more than what they are. And it's just action. the gunfights, the martial arts, the explosions, all this stuff that was taking place in camera. I mean, practical effects. This before the big boom of digital effects and visual effects. You know, they had little touch ups throughout. Don't get me wrong, but it was nothing to the caliber of, like, let's say, The Matrix, another Keanu Reeves franchise. You know, stuff like that. No, this was real in camera work with the action and the actors and stunt performers who you can point out, like, yeah, that's a stunt double, you know, and stuff like that. Uh, Bad editing, bad ADR and stuff, you know, bad dubbing. It is, but it's just a guilty pleasure. You love it for what it is. Um, Before I go any further with uh, this show is dedicated to someone we lost just last week on March the 17th, and he is a big part of this John Wick franchise, along with countless other projects that he had worked on throughout his career. That is none other than Lance Reddick, who passed away at the age of 60 on March the 17th of this year. And in the John Wick films, he played the character of Sharon, and he was the concierge at the Continental. And he's that actor that you probably didn't know his name, but you know him. He popped up in everything. He was a part of almost everything. You know what I'm saying? But he had that distinct voice, that distinct speech pattern that was just, it was kind of hypnotic in a way, you know? He just brought gravitas to a role, and he was in so many different type of films. It weren't just, he wasn't just typecast as a one particular character. He wide range of films, whether it's action or drama or comedy, you know, animated voiceovers and stuff like that. I mean, he did it all. Let's run through his filmography right quick and point out some of the films and television shows that he was a part of. And man, he will be missed. Lance Reddick in 1998, he was a part of the cast of Godzilla. That's the one with Matthew Broderick and who else was in that? Hank Azaria and all this. He was in an uncredited role um, as a soldier. He was in The Siege. Don't Say a Word. Jonah Hex, which was not a good movie, but I liked him in it when he popped up in it. White House Down, Old Boy, the remake, which it was a remix because if you watch Old Boy, if you watch the two Old Boy movies, yeah, that Spike Lee one was definitely a remix. It was not as good as the Korean version. But whatever. But he was in that. He was in the Spike Lee one. Um, the Guest, of course, the John Wick films. Angel Has Fallen. He played the Secret Service director in that film. Upcoming, he still has some films to come out. Along with John Wick Chapter 4, which comes out today. Later on this year, he'll be in White Men Can't Jump, the remake, and Ballerina, which is a spinoff from the John Wick films. So we will still have two more chances to see him on the big screen, even after, well, three more if you count John Wick Chapter 4, after his untimely passing. In television, he was in a lot of television. Here are just a few of some of his most notable roles on television. I think his first role ever was on New York Undercover, you know, back in the 90s. That was his first credited role. Um, the HBO series Oz, real good show. I remember that show. Me and my wife, we had just got married, in fact, because the show started in the year 2000, and we watched Oz. Don't ask us why, but that was our show. He also was on Law and Order SVU, and he was on Law and Order Criminal Intent. All three different characters. Then he returned to Law and Order again, playing a different character again. He was on all of the Law and Orders, played different characters. CSI Miami. He was on Lost, Fringe. Fringe, real good show, real underrated. Well, not really underrated. I think it gets its proper due, but it was a good show. He was a part of that cast. Uh, he was on the episode of "It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia." That was a funny episode. I'm a huge fan of that show. Love that show. Um, he was the voice of Ra's al Ghul on Beware the Batman, which was on Cartoon Network. Uh, the Blacklist, Key and Peele, Bosch. Oh my God! If you haven't watched Bosch, I forgot what streaming service it was on. Either it was on Prime or Hulu. I can't remember which one it was on, but what a show! He played the chief. Um, Big fan of him from that show alone, but along with countless others that I've already named. He was a voice on Rick and Morty. I think he played the president, I think, if I'm not mistaken, on an episode of Rick and Morty. And last but not least, yet another property that we will get to see after his passing, and that is the Disney Plus series that's premiering next year, I believe. Percy Jackson and the Olympians, where he will portray the character of Zeus. And I bet you that would be epic. Just to hear his voice as Zeus. Oh my God. Man, I'm going to miss this cat. So, RIP to a little baby legend, I guess you could say. Lance Reddick, gone too soon. Uh, my thoughts and prayers go out to his family, co-workers. I saw an interview with Keanu Reeves when they was at the premiere of John Wick Chapter 4, and he just poured his heart out about him, about Lance, and how much of a good guy he was, and how they were friends. Not just co-workers, but they were friends, and that he's truly gonna miss him. And so, yeah, man, that's a kind of a heavy thing going into this exciting review of these last or the first three John Wick films. But I felt I would be doing a disservice without mentioning one of the stars of this franchise, Mr. Lance Reddick, RIP. All right, let's get into the world of John Wick. John Wick, as I started off the show talking about, this was not what I pictured turning into a franchise. This little, just like, it looked like a little indie movie. And I remember I got a premiere, not the premiere, but an advanced screening for this film. And I was like, okay, I'll check it out, because I'm gonna be 100% honest with you. Prior to that, I really wasn't looking to go to run to the theater to see it. It looked like it was something to watch. It looked exciting, but I wasn't like, oh man, I gotta go see John Wick. And Keanu Reeves around this time, his stock has started dwindling. I ain't gonna say it fell. I ain't gonna say it bottomed out, but he wasn't Matrix level Keanu Reeves. He wasn't Speed level Keanu Reeves. He kind of on a downward spiral. He really wasn't making too many films, to be honest with you. He was kind of chilled. Every now and then he'll pop up in something, but nothing to the caliber of, the Matrix and all this other stuff. So this really interests me. I'm like, okay, Keanu Reeves in a little action movie. All right, he's getting up there in age. I guess they're following the same trope as, Liam Neeson. Wait till he gets old, and now he's in these action movies, Taken and Nonstop and Walk Among the Tombstones and all this other stuff that he's starring in at the age of 60 and 70 and stuff like that. But that's the way I looked at it. I just thought it was gonna be a normal little action movie. Boy, was I wrong. Was I wrong? Went to this advanced screening and was blown away by how good it was. You know, let's jump right in. First on the docket, of course, the one that started it all back in 2014, the action thriller John Wick. This film was directed by Chad Stahelski. I always struggle saying his name, Stahelski. Uh, just to cover all bases, he directed them all. So I'm not going to go into trying to butcher his name throughout the rest of this review. But him and David Lynch directed this one, whereas Chad directed all the rest of them. David Lynch went on to direct, Hobbs and Shaw, Deadpool 2, and Atomic Blonde, and so on and so forth. So it ain't like he left the project and ain't doing anything. He's actually carved out a pretty decent career for himself. But those two gentlemen were stunt coordinators prior to directing. This was their first film directing, and they worked with Keanu Reeves, on The Matrix and so on and so forth, and done stunt work for countless other action films. So they were real familiar with working with stunts and everything like that, action, in camera work and things of that nature. So this wasn't a hard task for them. Well, I say that, but directing is hard. But you get where I'm coming from. This was their wheelhouse. The film stars, along with Keanu Reeves as the main character, we have Alfie Allen, Bridget Moynahan, Dean Weathers, Ian McShane, John Leguizamo, and William Dafoe. And the premise of this film follows John Wick, a legendary hitman who is forced out of retirement to seek revenge against the man who killed his puppy, a final gift from his recently deceased wife. When you hear that, and once again, prior to this, I was not a dog owner. I didn't have connections with a dog like people do. You see these people go crazy about their dogs, like is it one of their children and stuff like that. And so I didn't connect to that. I always thought it was funny that all this was kicked off by the murder of this dog. I get the symbolism of it because this was the gift from his wife. She passed away, and she wanted to give him a companion to be around and something to remind him of her and all this here. So I get all that. But as far as the dog dying, it didn't impact me until I got a dog myself a few years after this. I can't remember what year it was we got old Bruce, but I love that dog. And then we end up getting another dog, Spot. And so we had two dogs, and I love them dogs. And I got it. I understood, man. They are like your children. They're part of the family, man. I get it. And so going back and watching it now, which I watched all three of these films just this past week in preparation for this show, and it hit me harder this go around than it did when I first saw it. But I still felt the impact nonetheless back in 2014 because it was a cute little dog, man. The dog did you nothing. Oh, man, why they killed the dog? Why did they kill that dog? And to sit back and think that we are going into chapter 4 of this franchise, the fourth film in this franchise, and multiple spinoffs that are planned or shot already or in the works, all because somebody broke in his house and killed his dog. $1 billion franchise or millions of dollars of franchise. I don't know how much this film franchise has grossed, but off of a dog, man. It's crazy. But this movie is just littered with action. This is a revenge film. This is a neo noir film. Um, it has all those elements, gun fu, just the sheer presence of John Wick, and they did a great job of setting this kind of aura around the character of John Wick without seeing what he did in the past. But the reaction from everybody else, when just the mere mention of his name, had grown men shivering. You know what I'm saying? Uh, the scene when I can't think of the guy's name, but the boss had well, the guy who killed John Wick's dog. Of course, we going into spoilers and stuff. The guy who killed John Wick's dog is the son of this big mob boss, or crime boss, whatever. And John Wick found him, and you know, uh, 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 well, before he found him, they also stole John Wick's car because that's where it started from. They saw him at a gas station and loved the car, and they broke in the house to steal the car and whatever. So they stole the car, killed the dog, and left him there bloody. And so the guys bring this car to this chop shop, which is owned by John Leguizamo. And John Leguizamo looks at the car, and he knows who car this belongs to. And so he looks at the car. He tells he asks him like, "Where do you get this car? Whose car is this? Where do you get this car?" And so the guy tells him, and he slaps the dude, right? The big boss man's son. That's a no-no. And he knew it was going to be a problem. So later on, when the big boss man finds out about it, he calls John Leguizamo, and he's like, "Did you hit my son?" You're like, "Yes, yes, I did." You're like, "Do you know what that means? You know, you know what I would do to you for that or whatever?" And he's like, "Well, sir, he stole the car." And the boss man was like, "So?" It was John Wick's car. And the big boss man, "Oh," and just hung up the phone. it was it was like all just with that, you knew that John Wick was not to be messed with. And they messed around and found out. They found out. John Wick goes on this tear throughout the city, taking out all them fellas, taking out old boy. Um, even coming to the point when he gets to the big boss man and takes him out as well. So much world was set up through this little average action movie, and it's no wonder why it spawned 3 sequels from this. You know, we get the introduction to the Continental, where Ian McShane character is the boss there, and this is the hotel where all the hitmen and criminals go. It's like a sanctuary for the criminals, and you know they have a set of rules, you know, and all this here, and this is where we meet Lawrence, not Lawrence, Lance Reddick's character as the concierge of this hotel, the Continental. And the rules of this world is set up here. We get all the rules, you know, no fighting at the Continental. No business is handled at the Continental. We learn about the high table and all this here. And, you know, we get all this world building within this little small movie. Just quick, subtle little things. And so now we have an idea of how this world works. You know, like when we see earlier in the film when the police officer comes to John Wick's house and asks him, "Oh, you're working again, John?" And he's like, "No, you know, I'm retired." You know, he knows who John Wick is. He knows what he's all about, but there's no consequences for his actions. You know, it's just how corrupt everything is and how basically the whole world is full of criminals. There's not a innocent person throughout the whole John Wick universe, if you want to be honest with you. But I actually loved the performance of Keanu Reeves in this film. Keanu Reeves has never been mistaken for a thespian. Um, A great actor. Even though you love him, I don't know anybody who doesn't love Keanu Reeves. He is great for what he is. We all love him in the Matrix. We loved him in Bill and Ted back in the day, Blank back in the day, Speed, of course, and all these other films. But as far as Keanu Reeves being this just Shakespearean trained actor or whatever, nobody really looks for Keanu Reeves like that. But in this type of film, where it is just heavy action, he really doesn't have a lot of dialogue. Uh, it was more or less just him being him, and he did a lot of his own stunts, most of his own stunts. Uh, gun, he went through a lot of gun training. The way he unloaded, it was like a symphony. Or him orchestrating a symphony. The way he would handle a gun, the way he would unload a gun or load a gun and check it, check it to see if it was loaded, and uh, 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 work it like the gun food, throwing punches and shooting at the same time, stuff like that. It was beautiful to watch, man. It was beautiful to watch. The other performances in this film were awesome as well. William Dafoe, just in a random casting, I guess you could say. I didn't expect to see William Dafoe in this movie, and he was in it, and he gave an awesome performance. I love the time we had with John Leguizamo's character. Ian McShane did an excellent job, as he did throughout this series. Uh, Alfie Allen, that's the son. He played a good role. Just weaselly little, privileged little, just nagging pest of a villain. You couldn't wait till John Wick got his hands on him. And the big boss of this film, actor who passed away, I want to say 2017, Michael Nyquist, uh, also an awesome performance as the main villain in this film. This film went on to gross $86 million off of a $20 million budget, and that's why we got so many sequels. They immediately was like, you know what, let's make some more of these, and it was a huge success. Kicked off the Keanu Reeves renaissance, I guess you could say. Got Keanu Reeves back in pop culture to the point where they made another Matrix film, which I don't know why they did it, but anyway, uh, he was born to play John Wick. Uh, this is probably his best character he's ever played. Yeah, you can argue it's Ted or Bill. I don't know which one he was, um, or Neo, or what's his character name in Point Blank? Can't remember. Anyways, for me, is John Wick. And John Wick from 2014 gets a letter grade of a B plus. It was really, really good, and you could tell that this was done. It's $20 million budget. Didn't have much to work with. A little throwaway film, but they utilized what they had to perfection. I felt it. Great job by all the filmmakers involved with John Wick. Now we move over to 2017 and we get chapter 2. John Wick chapter 2, once again, is a neo-noir action thriller directed by Chad. I said I wasn't going to attempt it. Chad. And we have Keanu Reeves returning as the character of John Wick. Along with him, we have Common, Lawrence Fishburne, Ruby Rose, Lance Reddick, Bridget Moynahan, John Leguizamo, and Ian McShane. This installment is probably my least favorite of the three. Not to say it is bad, it's just the least favorite of the three. The premise of this sequel is John Wick is forced back into his old life to fulfill a blood oath to crime lord Satino De D'Antonio. Um, I liked the story. I like, once again, the world building here. I did enjoy that. with Chapter 2. It was expanded more. We stretched out more. We went to Rome this go around, where John Wick was tasked by Satino to go kill his sister in Rome. And this is where we meet Carmen, who is Gianna's, who is Santiago's sister, or Santino. I keep saying Santiago. Santino's sister. He is the bodyguard, and he knows John Wick and knows that something is up. You know, something is up. That John Wick is here, and sure enough, uh, he's here to kill Gianna. And here is when all madness ensues. You know, but prior to that, in order to get John Wick to do it, uh, Santino blows up John Wick's house. You know, because he wouldn't honor the blood oath, which is once again uh, another part of this world building where you have to abide by this blood oath. And this was the blood oath that John Wick made in order to get out of this life of a hitman, because he found the love of his life, his wife. And so he has to honor that, but he doesn't want to, of course. So he first denies him until he blows up his house, and with him almost in it. And now John Wick is he's on his revenge kick again. And as I said before, this one is not as good as the first film, but the action is amazing here. We get introduced to the bulletproof suits in this film, because we wonder, well, how is John Wick able to survive all these gunfights with the other people and stuff. And we find out that, you know, it's special suits that he wears, and not only him but other hitmen in this little contingent. And and we get the reunion that everybody has been dying to see. Neo and Morpheus, yes, Keanu Reeves and Lawrence Fishburne back together in a film. And this was a good little introduction to Lawrence Fishburne's character. He's head of this group that walk around the city as like homeless men, but they're actually working this crime syndicate. It was just interesting and very, very cool the way that was set up. And all these little I don't know what to call them. They're not you lieutenants per se. They're like the king of their own syndicate, if that makes any sense. But they all answer to the high table. So uh but they're able to operate in their own way as long as they abide by the rules. And that is a running theme throughout these John Wick films, is the rules. And John Wick is that one person who now, after retiring and being forced back in, is operating outside of these rules. And that's what makes it more intriguing of a film, and more John Wick more intriguing of a character, because we're watching these films, and this one in particular, where it really gets crazy. We start to see that basically everybody is a hitman. Everybody in the world is a murderer who's after him. Uh, well, not so much in this one, but definitely in the next one. But you know, everybody he encounters is a hitman of some sorts. So with a movie with nothing but bad guys, including John Wick. John Wick is a bad guy. He's a killer. He's a hitman. So you need something different to set him apart from the other one. So he works outside the lines, so to speak. And not because he really chooses to, is because he's forced to. And this is where it really jumps off to where John Wick is uh you know just a complete outsider to the high table and to this syndicate of villains, and madness ensues, especially by the end of this film. Um, all because he murdered Santino in the Continental, and that is a no-no. And at the end of this film, he is declared excommunicado, whereas every hitman on planet Earth is now hunting him. And that's how this movie goes off. As I said, this isn't as good, I would say, but it's still pretty awesome. The action sequences was amazing. The direction was good. The visual style was different but good, and of course the performances, in particular, Keanu Reeves was pretty excellent. This film went on to gross $171 million off of a $40 million budget. They doubled the budget for this film and doubled the gross at the box office. So once again, we know we're getting a chapter 3. So in John Wick Chapter 2 gets a letter grade of a B minus. I thought it was decent, but just not as good as the first one. Well, do we have that same problem with Chapter 3? Let's find out. John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum released in 2019. And in case you don't know what Parabellum means, because I didn't, and at the time I didn't care, but I had to look it up. Even though they do say it in the movie, I still had to look it up to make sure that's what it was. Parabellum means prepare for war. And it's Latin, of course, but it is exactly that. John Wick Chapter 3 is the best in this franchise. This movie goes banana ham. It goes 0 to 60 in like pow. Once it starts, it never lets up. This film is once again directed by our boy Chad. And it stars, of course, Keanu Reeves as the title character. The supporting cast includes Halle Berry, Lawrence Fishburne, Mark Dacascos, Asia K. Dillon, Lance Reddick, Angelica Houston, and Ian McShane. When we left John Wick at the end of Chapter 2, he had pretty much committed the ultimate sin in this little underworld. He murdered a crime boss, a member of the high table, mind you, inside of the Continental, and now he's excommunicado. The premise of Chapter 3 Parabellum goes like this. It centers on John Wick going on a run from a legion of hitmen after a bounty is placed for his murder. The bounty was placed on his head because of what he did to the member of that high table. And the way this movie opens up, I mean, the opening of this movie, as I said, it goes 0 to 60, but actually it starts at 60 and he goes to like 120. John Wick is on the run. He has till midnight where we pick up. It's like 11:45 or something like that. He's hurt. He's bleeding. So he needs to find a doctor. So everywhere he runs to, there's somebody there, and they're looking at their watch, and it's like, tick tock, John, tick tock. So he had to run again. He go to somewhere else, and there's somebody waiting, like just looking at him and looking over at the clock, like you running out of time. And he finally gets to this doctor, and the doctor doesn't want to heal him, and he's like, look, I got 6 minutes or something to that effect. I got 6 more minutes. The doctor lets him come in, and he's stitching him up. So he's giving him the stitches, and he's like, hurry up, doc, hurry up. 2 minutes, and he's putting in the stitches. 1 minute, and it's going, and all of a sudden the clock ticks. And when the clock hits midnight, the doctor is midway through a stitch, and he just stops. He just stops. He was like, I'm sorry, I can't. I'm sorry, I can't go any further. So John Wick had to do it himself. He had to finish it himself, And the doctor when he points out to the medicine he needs to take. You know, I can't give it to you, but you need to take that or whatever. And so John Wick goes to get the painkillers or whatever, and he turns around and the doctor's holding a gun. And so he's like, "Here, shoot me. They'll never believe that I didn't stop at 12." And he was like, "No, no, you did stop. Yeah, but I showed you where the medicine was." And so just wound me, just wound me, and say that you took it. So John Wick shot him so he can convince him that he didn't help him. I'm like, oh my god, this is how we're starting this movie. We're starting this off like this. And so he goes to the library. He has a fight. He killed the man with a book. Uh, he's running from these other groups. He goes into this stable. He uses the horses to kick them and break their necks and stuff like that. Oh my god, this movie was wild. This movie was this was like a action junkie's wet dream. I have never seen anything like this. You know, the fight in that little museum with the knives and oh my god, man. And then we get the introduction to Holly Berry's character, who they have a history, they have a past, and we find out that she has a marker. You know, or John Wick has a blood oath marker that she owes him. And so she, just like John Wick did in chapter 2, didn't want to take it, but she knows she has to honor it. And so she wants to he wants Holly Berry to take him to or take him to this member of the high table so he can get a meeting with the big boss or whatever, so he can get his name cleared in this, that, and the third. And so they go meet this guy, and he's like, "No, it's not happening. We're gonna kill you both." And Holly Berry has these dogs, and I didn't think I would ever see a movie where dogs were used as a weapon. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we've seen crazy dogs in movies. You know, probably seen them in real life, but we've seen Cujos and Man's Best Friend and stuff like that. But these dogs were probably the most well trained dogs I have ever seen in my life. And Holly Berry worked them. And Holly Berry performing these action, I'm like, man, she was in that James Bond movie, that horrible James Bond movie, mind you. And she didn't look this cold as a character. She was a beast in this movie. Other beast. And those dogs, the way she'll yell those commands at them, and they'll come in, they'll either hit them in the crotch or yank them by the arm and just work them. You know what I'm saying? Those dogs were working. Now John Wick and Halle Berry were doing their thing, but I was more invested in the dogs working. Them dogs was something vicious. And the whole while I was watching this film, I'm like, man, I don't know how they pulled this off with these dogs. And the dogs really didn't hurt somebody, because the way those dogs were just mauling those guys was unbelievable. Was unbelievable. It was like, my God, they killing them. Um, but yeah, that was pretty awesome. Um, Asia Kate Dillon as the adjudicator, I think they did a awesome job as that character. I remember seeing them on I think it was Billions on Showtime, and I loved their character on there. And this is pretty much an extension of that character that they played on Billions, but I like this character. And uh, that final battle inside the Continental, because Winston, or Ian McShane's character, has went up against he's defying the high table, and now the adjudicator is ordering a siege on the Continental. And now we have John Wick, and this is where we get to see Lance Reddick's character, the concierge, go ham along with John Wick. And it was just oh, man, that was a beautiful scene. and these hitmen, this like little SWAT team of assassins come in there, and they've got their body armor on, and John Wick is shooting them in the head and all this here, and the bullets are bouncing off their helmets, and he has to find a way to kill these dudes. you know, Amazing, real good scene there. I love how in these movies the action goes up another level. It's like part one, I'm like, man, that was pretty awesome the way he's working these guns, this gun fu that they're doing. I don't see how they can up the ante here. And then you get to part two, even though it kind of lacked a little bit, but as far as the action is concerned, it amped it up a little more. So you was like, oh my gosh, man. The way they was using vehicles in that car in that film, oh man, that is awesome. How are they gonna amp it up some more? And they amped it up to 11 here. Like I said, using the horses, using a book, using knives, using old guns. The scene where John Wick goes into that, I guess you could say, old museum, and he takes this gun apart, this old like 1800s gun, and takes it apart, cleans it out real quick while the guys are running up the stairs to get him, and he's just putting it together, putting it back together, and he's essentially making another gun, and he puts it together, loads it up with a bullet. Soon as one of the guys get to the door, he shoots him and drops the gun and runs off. He only had one shot. He did all that just for one shot. It was like, my God, man, we do not deserve this movie. We do not deserve John Wick in our lives, but we are getting them. And that was beautiful. His little final battle in that little mirror room or wherever it was, with the two guys from the Raid movies, that was pretty awesome. That was pretty cool. And the fight with him and Mark DeCausis was also awesome at the end of the film. And leaving us on a little cliffhanger where Winston shoots John and he falls off the roof into the street below, only for the henchmen to go down there, and John Wick isn't there, like he was Michael Myers in Halloween. And so, but he is the boogeyman, by the way. Uh, Later to find out that he has recovered. He's with Lawrence Fishburne's character, and they have joined forces to take down the High Table. In this film ends on that note. This was once again a return to form from the original film. It surpasses the original film. Definitely surpasses the second film. Best of the franchise so far. John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum gets a letter grade of an A minus. Absolutely loved this movie. Uh, and I give these grades. And when you hear these grades, and you probably heard previous episodes of the show, which I appreciate y'all for listening, and you like, man, how is this up there with I don't know, Godfather or whatever? Well, I grade these movies based on what they are. This is not. I'm not saying these are instant classics. Like, this is an A minus. That's not to say that it's one of the greatest movies ever, but for an John Wick level film, for an action film, is an A minus. That's why I'm trying to explain it, because I've been asked that before. Like, how do you grade this? What's your way of thinking? I grade it on the level of film, or a film I can compare it to. I compare these films to like 90s action movies. In comparisons to 90s action movies, which these films are paying homage to, it is what it is. And I compare other films like to their genre. If it's a drama, other dramatic films, or science fiction films, or Star Wars films and stuff. It is on those levels. I don't. All films are not created equal, and so that's why chapter 3 gets a A minus. So I just want to throw that out there. I forgot the person who asked me that, but that's the reason why. This is all in anticipation, like I said before, for John Wick Chapter 4, which is in theaters today, everybody. Oh man, I can't wait for this film. But it doesn't end there. We're not through. Even after this, even after this, we still have more John Wick to get in our life. Oh, and before I go any further, I forgot, since I did a budget and box office breakdown for the other two. John Wick Chapter 3 was made for $75 million. It grossed 327 million worldwide. So you could tell every film just doubled or almost tripled. In this case, it's the previous film. So this is why we're going to get even more in this franchise. John Wick Chapter 5 is in development. So we have that to look forward to. Initially, it was going to be filmed back to back. But during the pandemic, when they started filming Chapter 4 and the pandemic happened, they decided to just do one film. So, and see how Part 4 shapes out. Part 4 probably could have been part of the story they're telling, because Part 4 or Chapter 4 is 3 hours long, and I'm here for it, all 3 hours of it. So yeah, Chapter 5 is in development. It is coming. I had mentioned before of a spinoff called The Ballerina, which was set up in Chapter 3 with the Angelica Houston character, and she has these ballerinas that, like, this little school for ballerinas, but behind the scenes is like a assassin training facility or whatever. But Ballerina is being filmed. Actually, it's finished filming. As I said before, Lance Reddick is reprising his role in that film. He already filmed his scenes. The film stars Anna de Armas, who we saw in the last James Bond film, No Time to Die. I could tell that she is ready for the action part of it, so I'm excited for that. It's being directed by Lynn Wiseman, who directed not all, but I think the first two Underworld films. Y'all remember those movies with the vampires and the werewolves? Yeah, he directed those two movies, at least the first two of those films, and he directed Live Free or Die Hard, which is a sneaky good Die Hard film, I must say. There's also more. There's also more. In development, they have Sophia. Sophia is the character that Halle Berry played. She is getting her own spin-off film. Uh, and I'm all for that too, because I want to see more of those dogs. I'm all for that. Yes, they are developing that as well. At least they were. I haven't heard anything else. Last time anything was reported on that was in 2022, last year. Nothing else has been said about it. I don't know. It's probably up to Halle Berry. Does she have the time for it or whatever? I think she ought to do it. It ain't like she's doing much of anything else right now. Of any, I mean, she did Moonfall. I think she can squeeze in some time for Sophia. Also, there's going to be the Continental TV show. Yes, based on that hotel, the famous hotel in the John Wick films. Um, that ought to be interesting. I would love to explore more. That can spawn off different spin-offs as well, depending on who is at the Continental, who comes through every now and then, depending on the episode or whatever. However they're gonna structure it, I'm pretty sure it will be interesting. Do y'all remember, and I asked y'all, like, it's an old movie. It came out a couple of years ago. The film Nobody, which spelled, which starred Bob Odenkirk from Better Call Saul. It was kind of John Wickish. Y'all remember that movie? It was surprisingly good, really good. And while you watch it, you can really get a John Wick vibe from it. Well, the reason it has a John Wick vibe, it is kind of in the same universe. Well, not kind of, because they are planning a Nobody slash John Wick crossover. Yes, we are getting an Avengers style, an Avengers style Hitman movie. That ought to be super interesting. I loved Nobody. I did. I thought that was a really good movie. And of course, you know how I feel about the John Wick films. And so we have even more, as I said, more to look forward to in this universe. But before we can get all that, let's all go check out John Wick Chapter 4 out in theaters today. 3 hours of action goodness. I can't wait for this. So, are you excited for the new John Wick Chapter 4? Let me know. Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also look me up on Twitter at KB Radio Network and on other social media platforms. Just look up the KB Radio Network. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, sharing the show, and subscribing to our YouTube channel. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and of course, YouTube. Everybody, thank you for joining me for this episode of Movie Goodness, where we reviewed the entire John Wick film franchise, with the exception of one, which I'm running off to see right now, John Wick Chapter 4. Be on the lookout for our review of that film to complete the collection. Once again, thank you for joining me. As always, want you all to know I love you. Continue to love one another. And until we speak again, you all be blessed.